The water was still, the gate was locked, and yet, when Marin Alcott looked out her kitchen window at 6:47 in the morning, there were three strangers swimming in her pool, laughing like they owned it. She didn't call the police. She didn't scream. She simply picked up her phone and began recording. Because Marin had learned something in 51 years that most people never do. The best revenge isn't fast, it's permanent. Marin Alcott had lived on Sycamore Bluff Road for 11 years. And in all 11 of those years, not one of them had been quiet. The house itself was the problem, or so the neighbors had always implied. It was too large for one woman, they said. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a wraparound porch, and a backyard that ended in a sheer limestone bluff overlooking the valley below. The pool sat at the center of all of it, a long, blue-tiled rectangle that Marin had designed herself, paying extra for the Italian stone coping and the underwater lighting that turned the water a deep, luminous turquoise at night. She had saved for it for 6 years after her divorce. She had built it as a promise to herself that she would create something beautiful, something entirely her own, and she would protect it. The first time it happened, she thought it was an accident. It was a Thursday evening in late June, 2 summers ago. Marin had come home from a 12-hour shift at the architectural firm where she worked as a senior project manager to find the pool gate open and the water surface disturbed, leaves and a crushed beer can floating near the drain. She had stood at the edge for a long moment, looking at it, feeling something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the evening air. Then she had cleaned it up, refastened the gate, and told herself it was probably just neighborhood kids who had wandered in by mistake. She installed a combination lock that weekend. 3 weeks later, she came home to find the lock hanging open. The combination had been left on 0000, which meant someone had simply tried every possibility until it clicked, or had guessed her starting point. There were more beer cans this time, and a beach towel left draped over the diving board, a large, garish thing printed with a cartoon pineapple that did not belong to her. She picked it up with 2 fingers and dropped it in the garbage. Then she stood in her yard in the growing dark and looked at the house next door. The Yardley property had changed hands 14 months ago. The previous owners, an older couple named Betts, had been quiet and courteous, the kind of neighbors who left homemade jam on your porch at Christmas and waved from across the fence without intruding. When Donnie Yardley moved in with his wife Cassidy, his brother Trace, and a loose, rotating cast of friends who seemed to treat the property as a permanent party venue, the character of the street changed overnight. Donnie was 34 and drove a lifted truck with a sound system powerful enough to rattle windows 2 houses down. He had a wide, flat face and a smile that sat slightly too long on his mouth, the smile of a man who had never once been told no in a way that stuck. Cassidy was sharp-boned and pretty in a brittle, exhausted way, and she had the look of a woman who had long ago decided that going along with things was easier than fighting them. Trace was worse than Donnie in every measurable way. Louder, more careless, more certain of his own immunity to consequence. Marin had introduced herself to Donnie the week he moved in, the way she introduced herself to all new neighbors, a bottle of wine, a handshake, a specific and genuine smile. Donnie had taken the wine and told her she had a beautiful house, his eyes moving past her shoulder to the pool in the backyard, and something about the way he looked at it, the casual ownership in his gaze, as if he were already calculating access, had made her feel a premonitory unease she had dismissed as unfair. She did not dismiss it now. She could not prove the Yardleys were responsible. She had no camera footage, no witnesses, nothing but a pineapple towel and a gut feeling. She went to Donnie the next morning and told him calmly that someone had been using her pool without permission and that she wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. Donnie listened to her with that too long smile and said he was sure it was just neighborhood kids, that kids these days had no respect and that she should get a better lock. He said it in a way that made her feel foolish for bringing it up. She got a better lock. She also ordered a security camera and mounted it on the corner of her garage, angled toward the pool gate. The camera was small and dark and not immediately obvious, and she did not mention it to anyone. The footage from the following Friday night told her everything she needed to know. At 10:23 p.m., the gate opened, and Trace Yardley climbed through, followed by 2 young men she didn't recognize, and a woman with long red hair who was already pulling off her shirt. They were in the pool by 10:28. They stayed until past midnight. One of them, not Trace, one of the others, urinated against her garage wall. She watched this on her phone at 6 in the morning and felt a quiet, controlled fury that she had learned, over the course of a difficult life, to treat as a resource rather than a liability. She called the non-emergency police line that morning and filed a report. The officer who took her statement was polite and told her that because there had been no property damage and no physical confrontation, the most they could do without catching the trespassers in the act was note the complaint. He suggested she post no trespassing signs, upgrade her fence, or, if she wanted to pursue it civilly, consult a lawyer. She thanked him and hung up. Then she went next door. Donnie answered in basketball shorts and a sleeveless shirt, holding a coffee mug. He had the unhurried look of a man who had slept well. Behind him, through the open door, she could see Trace at the kitchen table. Maren did not raise her voice. She said, "I have your brother on camera in my pool at 10:30 last Friday night. I've filed a police report. I'm asking you once directly. Please make sure it doesn't happen again." Donnie's smile shifted by a few degrees. "You have him on camera doing what exactly? Swimming? That a crime now?" "Trespassing is a crime," Maren said. "So is criminal mischief. So is indecent exposure, which is also on camera." From the kitchen, Trace called out, "She serious?" He said it with a laugh, as if Maren were a minor source of entertainment. "Tell him I'm serious," Maren said. She looked at Donnie for 3 full seconds without blinking. Then she turned and walked back to her house. That night, someone put a dead fish in her pool filter. Maren discovered it the next morning when she went to clean the skimmer basket. She stood holding the lid for a moment, smelling it, looking at the small, gray, deliberately placed thing. She understood immediately what it was. Not random, not careless. It was a message. It was an escalation. She photographed it. She photographed the skimmer, the basket, the surrounding area. She added the photograph to the folder she had created on her laptop, the one she had labeled simply Documentation, which now contained 47 images, 3 video clips from her security camera, her police report number, and a 3-page log of dates, times, and observed incidents. She had been keeping the log since the first incident. She was, by profession, a woman who managed complex projects with many moving parts, and she applied the same methodology here: evidence, sequence, pattern. She was building something, even if she didn't yet know exactly what shape it would take. For the next 3 weeks, she did nothing visibly reactive. She went to work, she came home, she swam her evening laps in her beautiful pool, and she let the cameras run. The Yardleys used the pool twice more during that period. Once on a Wednesday night when she was home and sitting in her darkened living room, watching the light from her phone screen as the footage fed live, and once on a Saturday afternoon when she was genuinely out. She documented both. She noted the license plates of the vehicles parked in the Yardley driveway. She took photographs through her fence of the people she didn't recognize. She also called her attorney. Renata Osei was 47, sharp as a surgical instrument, and had handled Maren's divorce with the kind of methodical ruthlessness that Maren had found deeply reassuring. Renata listened to the summary of events without interrupting, asked 4 specific questions, and then said, "You want to go civil or you want to go criminal?" "I want to go both," Maren said. Renata was quiet for a moment. Then, "You documented everything?" "Everything." "Good. Don't stop." Maren didn't stop. What she did in those 3 weeks, besides document and plan, was talk to her other neighbors. She did it carefully and without drama, the way she did most things. She started with Philippa Strand, who lived on the other side of the Yardley property and who had spent 6 months watching Donnie's trucks tear up the easement along the back of her lot. Philippa was 61, retired, and furious in the quiet, long-burning way that older women with nothing left to lose sometimes are. She had her own documentation, photographs of tire tracks, a record of noise complaint calls, a folder of emails to the homeowners association that had gone largely unanswered. She and Maren sat in Philippa's kitchen for 2 hours and compared notes. Then Maren talked to Gerald Foss across the street, who had twice found Yardley guests parking in front of his driveway, and to the Nakamura family 3 houses down, whose teenager had been intimidated by Trace at the neighborhood park, and to Lou Bertram, the retired contractor who lived on the corner, who had watched a piece of the Yardley fence be demolished by a reversing truck and never replaced. She was not organizing a mob. She was assembling a record. By the time the next incident occurred, Maren had statements, photographs, and documented complaints from 6 neighbors, all of which she had forwarded to Renata along with her own file. She had also, with Renata's guidance, sent a certified letter to both Donnie and Cassidy Yardley informing them of the documented trespassing incidents, the security footage that existed, and her intention to pursue legal action if the behavior continued. The letter had been delivered on a Tuesday. She knew it had been received because she had paid for delivery confirmation. The next incident occurred on a Thursday. That morning at 6:47, she looked out her kitchen window while the coffee brewed and saw 3 figures in the water. They were clearly visible, moving without urgency, completely at ease. She recognized Trace immediately by his height and the tattoo on his left shoulder. The other two were the same young men from the Friday night video. She had come to think of them as Unit A and Unit B because she had not yet identified them by name, though she was working on it. She picked up her phone. She began recording. Then she sent a text to Renata. "They're in my pool right now. I have live footage." Renata's response came in 40 seconds. "Don't engage. Call 911. Keep recording." Marin called 911. She reported 3 individuals trespassing on her property, gave her address, and stated clearly that she had ongoing documentation of repeated incidents, a filed police report, and a certified legal letter that had been sent and received. She used the word ongoing and the phrase pattern of harassment, and she gave the dispatcher her incident report number from the earlier filing. She spoke in a clear, moderate voice. Then she stood at her kitchen window, holding her phone steady, and kept recording. The police arrived in 9 minutes. Trace was still in the pool when the patrol car came up the driveway. The other two had seen the lights and run, cutting back through the property gap at the edge of her fence, and she had footage of them leaving. But Trace, for reasons that were either arrogance or stupidity, or some combination of both, was still there, now sitting on the edge of the pool with his feet in the water and his arms crossed, radiating the attitude of a man who had decided a fence was his best option. Officer Delia Vance was in her early 40s, compact and unhurried. She took one look at the scene, one look at Marin, who was already on the back porch with her phone out and her documentation folder printed and paperclipped in her other hand, and Marin could see the recognition in her face. This was not a first complaint. "That your pool?" she asked Marin. "Yes," Marin said. She held out the folder. "This is documentation of 5 prior incidents. There's a police report on file. The number is on the top sheet. There's a certified letter sent to the property owner next door, informing him of the trespass pattern, received 3 days ago. I have video of this morning's entry, and footage of 2 prior incidents on the cameras." She pointed to the camera mounted on the garage corner. "Everything has been forwarded to my attorney." Officer Vance took the folder. She looked at the top sheet for about 4 seconds. Then she looked at Trace. Trace said, "This is ridiculous. She lets us use the pool all the time." Marin said, "That's a lie, and I have documentation proving it's a lie." Officer Vance held up one hand briefly in Marin's direction, not dismissively, but in the practiced gesture of someone managing a scene, and turned her full attention to Trace. "ID, please." Trace looked at Marin. His expression had shifted. The performance of ease was still there, but underneath it, for the first time since she had known him by sight, she saw something else. She saw uncertainty. She had been waiting for that. "ID," Officer Vance said again, and this time her voice had an additional texture to it, flat and final, and Trace reached for his wallet. He was cited for trespassing. The citation was not an arrest, but it was a formal legal document with his name on it, connected to her address, and it fed directly into everything else Renata was building. As the patrol car backed down her driveway, Marin stood on her back porch and looked across the fence at the Yardley property. Donnie was standing on his back porch, watching. He was not smiling. Marin looked at him for a long moment. She did not wave. She did not speak. She simply held his gaze until he looked away first. Then she went inside and closed the door. That afternoon, she emailed Renata the morning's footage, the citation number, and a note that read, "Ready when you are." Renata's response, "Civil suit filing Monday." Also forwarding the neighbor statements to the City Code Enforcement Office. "Your neighbor has 6 outstanding violations. I've been saving them." Marin read this sitting at her kitchen table, the late afternoon light coming through the window and laying itself across the tile in long yellow bars. She put down her phone and looked out at the pool. The water was still and clear and brilliantly, peacefully blue. She went outside and swam her evening laps, all 30 of them, without stopping, in the cool of her own beautiful water. By the time she pulled herself out at the far end and sat on the Italian stone coping with her legs dangling and the valley spread below the bluff in the evening haze, the fury she had been carrying since June had burned down to something quieter and far more durable. Not anger, something more like patience. The specific patience of a woman who has decided not to react but to respond, not to escalate but to outlast, not to win a fight but to win a case. She had never once raised her voice in any interaction with the Yardleys. She had never threatened, never confronted beyond the single factual visit to Donnie's door. She had never vandalized, never retaliated, never let emotion override method. She had simply watched, documented, connected with her community, retained a lawyer, and used every legal mechanism available to her with the same precision she brought to managing a construction project with 40 subcontractors and a $20 million budget. What the Yardleys had never understood, what Donnie's too long smile and Trace's laughing dismissal and the dead fish in her filter had all confirmed, was that they had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had looked at a single woman in a big house and seen softness. They had seen isolation. They had seen someone who would eventually give up and accept the intrusion as the price of proximity to people like them. They had not seen what Maren had spent 11 years becoming. They had not seen the woman who had rebuilt her life from a legal separation at 40 with no savings and a car with a cracked windshield. They had not seen the 6 years of 60-hour weeks that had produced that pool. They had not seen the woman who had managed a 3-year dispute with a city zoning board over her property's western boundary line and won, on the record, without ever raising her voice. They had seen a pool. They had not seen a fortress. The civil suit, Renata had explained, would target 3 things: the documented trespass damages, which included the cost of the pool's cleaning and chemical rebalancing after each incident, the installation of additional security equipment, and the intangible harm of the sustained harassment pattern. The second target was Donnie and Cassidy Yardley as property owners, on the grounds that they had received legal notice of the trespass behavior, had demonstrably failed to stop it, and could therefore be held liable for the subsequent incident. The third target was the trespass citation against Trace, which, in combination with the documented pattern and the neighbor statements, gave Renata a foundation for a harassment claim that went beyond property damage into the territory of intentional infliction of emotional distress. "It won't make you rich," Renata had said. "But it will cost them, legally, financially, and in terms of their standing with the city, once the code violations are in play." "I'm not trying to get rich," Maren had said. "I'm trying to make them stop." "Filing a civil suit is usually pretty effective for that," Renata had said dryly. What neither of them had anticipated was what happened the Sunday before the filing. Maren came home from the grocery store at 2 in the afternoon to find Cassidy Yardley sitting on her front porch steps. Not the backyard, the front porch. Cassidy was wearing sunglasses and a light jacket despite the heat, and she was sitting with her knees together and her hands folded in her lap in the posture of a woman who had made a decision that cost her something. Maren parked in the driveway and got out and stood looking at her. "Cassidy, I need to talk to you," Cassidy said. She pulled her sunglasses off and Maren could see that she had been crying, or was close to it. "Please, I know I have no right to ask, but please." Maren set her grocery bags down on the top porch step. She sat down on the other side of them, leaving the bags as a mild, physical boundary between them. She waited. "I know what's been happening," Cassidy said. "I know what Trace has been doing. I know what Donnie told him about this being fine, about you not being the type to do anything." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I'm not here to excuse it." "Good," Maren said. "Because there isn't an excuse." "No," Cassidy said. She looked at her hands. "I got the letter from your lawyer. You were listed on it because you're co-owner of the property." "I know." A pause. "I didn't know about the fish in your filter. I found out last week and I want you to know that wasn't something I knew about." Maren looked at her steadily. "What do you want, Cassidy?" Cassidy looked up. Her eyes were red at the edges. "I want to know if there's a version of this where we don't go to court. I want to know if there's anything I can do. I'm trying to—" She stopped again. Something crossed her face, something tightly controlled that Maren recognized from her own bathroom mirror in the years after her divorce. "I'm trying to handle things that are not entirely within my control right now." Maren was quiet for a moment. The street was still in the Sunday heat, a sprinkler running somewhere 2 houses down. "Are you asking me to drop the suit?" she said. "No," Cassidy said. "I'm asking what it would take for you to consider it." That was a different question. Maren recognized it as a different question, and she respected it for that. "Talk to Renata O.C., she said finally. "She's my attorney. Her number is on the letter. Tell her what you told me, that you want to know what resolution looks like outside of court. She'll tell you what I'm willing to consider." She picked up her grocery bags and stood up. "I'm not your enemy, Cassidy. I never was. I just needed you people to stop." Cassidy put her sunglasses back on. "I know," she said quietly.